Goeiedag, dit is een nieuwe KoersKompas podcast. Vandaag hebben we een speciale gast, Bill Sheriff van enCore Energy, onder andere. Hij heeft meerdere bedrijven, waaronder verschillende bedrijven in de uraniumsector. Daar is waar Bill eigenlijk heel erg bekend mee is geraakt door de vorige cyclus, ongeveer 20 jaar geleden. Een groot succes gemaakt van zijn bedrijf toen. Nu is hij terug om dat opnieuw te doen. Dat heeft hij al voor een groot deel uitgevoerd. Maar hij heeft nog wat andere dingen die hij momenteel aan het doen is, die zeker de moeite zijn. En daarom gaan we vandaag eens in gesprek. Bill, thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me, Bart. Appreciate it.
I have compiled a list of questions, quite an extensive one. Just gonna read them. That's so that I can,
Sure.
get to the true essence of the question entirely. Let's start off with the uranium itself here before we dive into the company specifics of the companies we run. Where are we in the cycle here? The bears would say, the price of uranium has quadrupled. It's probably closer to the end than the beginning. While maybe the bulls would say there's a sustained supply deficit, structural deficit, and longer term contract market has not really seen replacement rates. So we're actually not closer to the end than to the beginning, or much closer to the beginning than to the end. What do you think?
I think we're in pre-game warm-ups. The game hasn't even started yet. If you look at, I think the best way to look at this is if you were given the opportunity to participate in oil and gas in the 1950s. Not every quarter is going to be a good winning quarter. Not every year is going to be a good winner. But when you look at it over the long time frame, we have decades of far above average growth potential. And I think that, quite frankly, there's nothing to replace nuclear. Solar and wind are not competitive without government subsidies. There's just nothing to handle it unless you want to burn coal, which certainly is not a very good answer. So without, to sum it up, without nuclear, there is no AI. And AI is the future of the Western world anyway. So I think nuclear is here to stay. It's going to be presenting itself in a number of different aspects. And, from conventional reactors, which are, being built at a record pace now, and certainly planned and designed, to, the small modular reactors. Those are coming along. I think people are a bit frustrated because things have taken a bit longer to develop along the permitting lines, et cetera, especially in the US. But I think you'll see that change rather quickly in January with the new administration coming in. The one big advantage, both sides of the political aisle are very much in favor of nuclear energy, but the one big difference is how they approach it. And I think the new administration will come in with some very finite regulatory reform and deadlines for permitting. And that goes all the way up and down the fuel chain, from permitting nuclear power plants all the way down to permitting uranium extraction. So I think we're in a very good spot. Many people think the uranium price is down 35% from its high, but that's only spot, and an almost insignificant amount of uranium trades under spot. If you're looking at the contract prices, they haven't been this high ever. So we're looking, for those of us that actually produce uranium, we're looking at a price increase from last January when we had the spot high. We're looking at a price increase of about 30%, 35%. Right. So I think the market's not particularly well understood.
Yeah, that's a fact. I would totally agree with that. Let's move on here. Well, I was going to ask you about Trump, if it's going to be good for nuclear, but I guess you already answered that a little bit here.
I think either one will be good for it. I talked about the new coming administration. The outgoing administration preferred to take the approach of a lot of subsidies for building out the downstream end of it, that is the conversion and enrichment. And I think we'll see that continue because, quite frankly, there are huge amounts of capital required, especially on the enrichment, which, of course, is our big bottleneck when we consider that Russia has almost half of the world's enrichment capacity. The U.S. is sorely lacking. And in order to accelerate that and get it up and producing within the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to take enormous sums of money. So I think you'll see that coming even from the Trump administration, just perhaps not quite as open taps, open spigot as you would with the Democrats.
Right. Did you see the new Department of Energy guy, Chris Wright?
Yes, in fact, he's a member of the board of Eurasian Minerals, EMX, a company I follow in the U.S. and used to be a board member of myself. He's a good guy. I certainly worked in nuclear before and as a nuclear advocate as well as oil and gas. He's just a very pro-energy person, and that's really what we need. I mean, after all, if you look in the U.S. at the states that are the most productive in uranium, it's not at an either-or situation. Both Wyoming and Texas are extremely pro-energy. We're talking about coal, natural gas, oil, coal being primarily in Wyoming, but it certainly doesn't restrict their enthusiasm for nuclear. In fact, Texas has started their own nuclear program, and it's quite an exciting time. But I think we're just on the beginning thresholds of the industry, and the one thing that keeps people from seeing that is that they've been long-suffering, attention on the nuclear industry for 40 years. There've been a lot of false starts, and I think people that have watched it that long are a little tired. But I think nonetheless, those that have the patience will finally be rewarded.
Right. Let's move on. Next one here. With mining challenges and the growing uranium supply-demand gap, which is expected to accelerate over the next decade, higher prices alone might not be the solution. As new mines take years to develop, what is your perspective on addressing this issue?
Well, here again, I think and I'm only going to restrict this to the Western world because third world countries, et cetera, they have their own unique challenges, most of which aren't permitting. They're usually related to other less transparent issues, but such as in Niger, for instance. But in the Western world, it's permitting, and the other thing that falls in the second place is personnel. And we've had essentially a 40-year absence of new personnel coming into the industry. I mean, there've been a few, but not many. And most of your universities certainly aren't geared up to put out, nuclear personnel either in the supply chain or in the actual generation. And most of the people working in the nuclear power plants came out of the Navy. We've got a serious 2 or 3 generations of talent coming out of higher education that we're missing, and it's going to take a while to fill that gap. During that time, regulatory reform in terms of permitting. We've got to get it to where you can permit these projects. Uranium's not scarce. There's uranium all over the world. It's eighth most common element on the planet. Finding an economic deposit of it, bit more difficult, but there are a number of them. But we've got to get the regulatory reform to get those pounds out of the ground in a timely manner, because you just simply can't wait 10 or 20 years on a project.
Yeah, very true. Moving over to enCore here. enCore is now the leading uranium producer in Texas. How do you plan to expand this leadership to Wyoming and ultimately across the United States? The toll milling agreements with Cameco present mutually beneficial opportunities. Pursuing a strategy of merger acquisitions, how do you intend to convince other players to collaborate and join forces to maybe create a stronger, more competitive entity?
Well, I think mergers is the key as opposed to acquisitions. We've been very active in the predecessor company that a number of us were involved with, Energy Metals, back during the last cycle. All the companies were built on M&A, and this one's no different. Sorry about that. This one's no different, and we certainly expect to see that continue. Toll milling agreements, you mentioned that. Usually toll milling agreements are great for the person that has the mill or the processing facility, not so good for the other side. And so that would not be our favorite approach. So that would, I guess I wouldn't rule it out, but we'd much rather continue to build out, commanding control of additional facilities. We've got 3 of the 11. And we're going to have to pause for a moment.
Oh.
I apologize, Bart. I've got, can you stop the recording and start again?
Let's see. Let's move on. Off to PFN, the prime fission neutron technology that you guys acquired. It's a major advantage for enCore. How many PFN trucks stations are currently operational, and are there any plans to scale?
We have the technology. We currently are making a succession in terms of the technician that operates and works on the tools. They're very high tech, very finicky tools. We've currently got, I think, 6 or 7 of them working. Don't hold me to that number. I haven't checked in the last few weeks, but something on that order. And we've got considerably more tools that need to be brought up to date. So, and we certainly can construct more. But the gentleman that's worked on these for years is reaching retirement age. And so we've put out a search to the nuclear physics departments and nuclear engineering departments looking for that succession planning. But right now we're in a good shape to take care of our own needs. We have not offered outsourcing, that is to fix the few PFN tools that are out in other people's hands, most of which are not operational at this point. At some point, I suspect they'll want those to get fixed, and we'll look at that, but certainly we'll take care of our own needs first.
Right. Yep. Many U.S. uranium producers have lowered their production forecasts and may need to purchase pounds from the spot market. While enCore's ramp-up at Alta Mesa is progressing well, do you foresee additional purchases to fulfill your 2025 contractual obligations?
We hope not. The funny thing about production is you never know what's going to come up. You don't plan for interruptions. We have purchased in the past, as you can see from our financial statements and news releases. But we don't, we certainly hope to get through without doing that in the future. That being said, if the price of uranium in the spot market were to dip any more from its current levels, we might very well be looking at taking on a bit of inventory just as a matter of padding those contracts and or thinking it's a good buy.
Right, opportunistically, right?
Absolutely.
One more about uranium itself. Why has the uranium price kept pace with inflation? For example, today's $80, which is the spot price here, just about, is equivalent to pretty much 53 in the 2007 dollars when the last cycle peaked. What factors are contributing to this disparity, and maybe is that also the inflation that we've seen throughout the last few years? Is that also the reason why maybe the miners haven't performed as well as expectations of some people might have said?
Yeah, I'm going to take those in reverse order because I really can't explain the dynamics of inflation on the spot price here again, because the spot price is not a liquid, actively traded. It's reported every day, but many times those spot prices are not even reflecting a trade. They're simply reflecting the spread between the bid and ask. Other times during, about 90% of the time when it's quiet, most of the spot business is between traders trading back and forth for 25 and 50 cents a whack. So, it's not reflective of a true market. So its relationship to inflation, I don't know. Certainly you had a major amount of uranium come into the market when Fukushima happened, when Japan shut down. Many of those utilities either loaned or sold off their inventories. And Japan historically had one of the higher inventory levels in terms of years of fuel backup for their generators. So, that certainly blunted it. But what could account for the 15-year time frame or so? I couldn't really go beyond those factors. But outside of the fact, most of the time, nobody cared about uranium. Nobody cared about nuclear power. It's really only been in the last 3 or 4 years that we've seen the renaissance come. And so I think those factors together make it difficult to compare to the pricing. But the second part of your question, Jeff.
Do you think that now that inflation is lower, that we've had the inflation scare that really got the cost of a lot of mining companies going up, that it's subdued? Is that a good thing here?
I think it has subdued simply because labor costs have gone up even higher than inflation rates. Drilling costs for those of us in the ISR business have gone up. Scarcity of drilling has slowed down production in many instances. And here again, I think probably the biggest single thing holding back some of the producers are two factors. Number one is very real, and that is there've been a significant number of production cuts, also delays, many delays in terms of when projects are coming on. So I think that's contributing to investor fatigue or skepticism, as well as what you started the interview with. Whether we're at the beginning or the end of or somewhere in the middle of the cycle. So, there was a lot of quick money made in the first year or two of the cycle. Many of those folks have probably started getting weary, and some of them have probably left. So, it's a variety of factors, but, clearly the delays in projects coming on, cost overruns, production cutbacks, these have slowed it down. And also, simple fact of the matter is once you get, to be a fairly high price stock in terms of resource stocks, $3, $4, $5, $10 a share, you don't get the same investor crowd chasing things that you do in the speculative exploration companies. There's been a narrow segment that's probably outperformed the producers. But there's also the very small end. It's very difficult to raise capital in uranium now for the startups, the $1 and $2 million companies. Those are hard to find money for now because the investors have just kind of walked away from that. There's still the occasional one, but they aren't coming through nearly as fast as they were.
Fair enough. This one is an extensive one here.
Right.
Let's see. New Mexico, you could call the American Kazakhstan in a way, as in terms of historical production reserves. The Clean Energy Association of New Mexico is making progress, educating the Navajo and local communities. But this could take decades. Do you anticipate the new White House administration supporting funding for infrastructure projects in the area and facilitating joint venture with the Navajo for a uranium renaissance in New Mexico?
I don't really see who knows what the new administration is going to do for sure, but it doesn't seem like it would be very high on their list to, fund such endeavors. Hopefully they will, but I just don't see that coming. I think you said it very well. It could take a long time. You've got to work with the indigenous people and you've got to bring them along as part of the group. And at enCore, we actually want to do that. But, our focus at enCore is 100% on production. We've got a pipeline of projects to bring along into production and ramp ups that we're currently underway. That's 100% of our focus right now. We do have a lot of New Mexico holdings. The subject does come up from time to time, what are we going to do with it? But really to put a full court press on it, if you will, and really maximize the situation there, we need almost an entirely different staff. Because it's not a matter of finding the uranium in the ground. It's a matter of doing the relationship building, communication, community events, and helping to subsidize some of the infrastructure in the area. And quite frankly, it's just beyond enCore's ability right now. We're concentrating on revenue.
Right. Yep. Makes sense. I guess don't know the exact numbers, but like 60% of the uranium production nowadays is ISR. There's many advantages, but in the past century, the US also had like 20 conventional uranium mills. Today, they have one, I think. How do you foresee the dynamic and market share of uranium production in the US there evolving?
I think it's highly dependent upon going back, and I keep saying the same things over and over. There's 2 or 3 overriding issues, at least in the US: permitting, and permitting. The problem in 1980, we had 22 conventional mills operating. In 1980, we produced 43 million pounds of uranium. Now we have one mill that's intermittently operational. And we have 2 that are still licensed, but are, not ready to produce by a long shot. We're not without significant renovation. So in order to get the conventional side in the US to blossom beyond energy fuels, and I think it will, I think we'll see a couple of more mills built. But until the regulators get a much shorter timeline, right now, about the quickest you could possibly permit a mill in the US is 5 years. And there's just a very few states that you can do that in, probably Colorado, Utah. Utah, you might be able to do it in 4. But that's about it. Compare and contrast that to, your in situ, which, our permit, our first one was 20 months in Texas and 17 on the second project. So the CapEx on a capital mill, the permitting delays and timelines, and people forget that, it's not just the CapEx, and oftentimes this isn't even reflected in their feasibility studies, or at least their PEAs. You've also got the time to keep in business through that permitting and the millions of dollars a year to keep the permitting going forward. It's not like you submit a permit and you wait 5 years. It's an ongoing iterative process with the regulators, and it's quite detailed. And you've got to bring on engineers and design the thing years before you build it. So there's an awful lot of cost to get to that CapEx expenditure, both in time, material, resources. And so it's a limiting factor. But as I say, with the current new incoming administration, I think we'll see those timelines shortened a bit, or at least streamlined somewhat. And, I'm optimistic that we'll see 2 or 3 more mills built in the US. I don't think we'll ever see 20 again. It's just, maybe we will, but that's even beyond my dreams.
Yeah, it'll take a while for certain. That's for sure. Conventional mining, how can we make it more efficient and like accessible in the US? Could leveraging the knowledge and experience gained from ISR techniques be a viable approach to enhance the efficiency, sustainability, and economic feasibility of conventional mining operations?
The big difference in my mind comes at the back end. Once the product has been produced and sold, then what? With in situ, we have a very, very clear path to reclamation. And the costs don't quit after you're done mining it or after you're done producing it. In our case, we don't mine, we move water, not rocks. But either approach, once you've produced the product and sold it, your costs continue because you're on the hook for reclamation. In our instance, we have to reclaim the water and the underground source and the site, of course. But we can do that on ISR because we only use oxygen and a little bit of carbon dioxide to balance the pH, a little bit of baking soda to balance the pH. But we don't put anything harmful into the ground. So for us, reclamation is very straightforward. We simply quit adding things, install a reverse osmosis unit, and circulate the water for 2 or 3 years, and it'll go back down to background. And sometimes you have to circulate a little bit longer, but that's the process. Compare and contrast that to surface mining and a conventional mill. You have tailings ponds, you have tailings, you have waste piles that are all radioactive. And at least in the US, you may well be on the hook for, or continuing to spend money for 50 years or longer on monitoring that site once you've reclaimed it. And obviously reclaiming that is a heck of a lot more expensive than simply circulating water. So that's a natural inhibition to conventional mining, and why I think there'll be 2 or 3 new mills come along, and there will be conventional mining and milling, but I don't think it's going to ever approach what it did just because of the reclamation issues.
No. Yep. Moving over to another company you're involved in, nuclear fuels. You could argue that it's the leading ISR exploration company in the US. Can you tell us a little bit what's going on there?
Well, I'm just a director on it, but obviously enCore likes what they see. They're just a passive shareholder in it. They don't exercise any direction or anything, management decisions of any kind over it. But based on the information we're seeing, we certainly like what they're doing, and they are one of the more aggressive, if not the most aggressive ISR explorers in the country.
Yep. Over the past decades, you've worked with a lot of variety of entrepreneurs, both successful and less so. Which mining promoter or entrepreneur do you admire the most?
Oh boy, there's a few. It kind of depends what you're looking for in terms of building mines or in terms of financing them. One of our and I'll have to give a disclaimer. One of our groups, funding group, Power One Capital, has put a lot of strength behind us, and especially in the early days, they've got great vision, and an incredible track record, not just with our companies, but with some that were even far more successful than enCore. So, the gentleman that runs that, Pat DiCapo, has got great vision as to what he sees further ahead, and so he gets in earlier and really helps some of the companies that have some of the better ideas fund and move forward like that. In terms of mine builders, there's a number of them out there. In terms of the conventional mining, in situ, I think just look at it's started again, so it's hard to say over the last 10 or 20 years, but here again, tooting our own horn, our own CEO Paul Goranson. He put Alta Mesa into production to start with back when it was a private ranch back during the last cycle. Set the spot price most of the way up to $130 by being the only producer selling into the spot market. So, I think you'd certainly have to acknowledge him as one of the leaders in the ISR business.
Definitely. Definitely. Great asset to enCore. Great man. Great.
Yeah, our team and our people are our best asset. Now, you didn't ask the question, but I've got to give them a plug because
Yeah,
it really does make the difference.
you got more than your fair share of great people there. Absolutely.
That's right. You must have heard one of my speeches. I always tell people we've got more than our fair share of talent, and that's our biggest asset.
Absolutely. Another company that you're involved in that
Yeah, let's stay, if you don't mind, let's stay on enCore for this
enCore?
one.
Okay, well, fair enough. Okay, let's see. With the current projected growth in nuclear energy, how do you anticipate the supply chain meeting the increasing demand? Do you expect advancement in enrichment technology to play a significant role?
Here again, I'm not an expert, but we do have one on our board, Susan Hoxie-Key, who's a nuclear physicist or nuclear engineer, and certainly laser enrichment has a place. It's coming. It makes a lot of sense. It's been around for a number of years, never quite perfected, but I think we're there now. So I think that's going to be a big function, or if we aren't there, we're awfully close. I think it's time. And I think that, this will cause we've got several big mines, in particular NextGens, that's going to be 30 million pounds a year coming on. The good news for the rest of the industry is that's been delayed, and it's probably, in my opinion, going to continue to be delayed. I don't know the finer details, but you don't have to know the details to look around the world and see almost every project's delayed 2 or 3 years. So I think that one will be no different. But in a way, it's better for the whole world that it is delayed a couple of years, because in 2 or 3 years, that 30 million pounds a year, there'll be room for it. If it were to come onto production today, it would fill the gap and then some. So, you look out at the projected needs, and you also look at the small modular reactors. They've been delayed 2 years already. Bill Gates was going to have one in production by 26. Now he's saying 28. And with all the money in the world, which is what he's got, he still can't make it happen any quicker, just because we can't get the fuel he needs, because we can't make it. So, Centrus has been incentivized by the government to start making HALEU, the 19.75% high assay low enrichment uranium. And they've successfully produced some, but here again, some is probably this much. It's not enough for the program. They'll be ramping up and producing more and more, but the ramp up all the way along is going to cause a slower realization of the nuclear promise than everyone thinks. And that may add to the skepticism that you see with the people thinking we're at the end of the cycle, because there is a delay. I mean, I believe all of these projections looking out 30 years of what we're going to need, and the huge supply demand imbalance that we'll be chasing. It's healthy to have a little one to chase it. It's not healthy to have a big one. If you have a huge imbalance and you can't buy fuel, or fuel gets to be $1,000 a pound or some crazy thing like that, that may inhibit people from building nuclear reactors, just because they can't get the fuel, or they're not certain they can get it. So, it's one of those classic cases that a little bit of something is good, but a whole lot of something is bad. So a little bit of supply imbalance for a long time is great. It'll generate a very healthy industry. And going back to my oil and gas observation, I think we've got decades of well above average growth, but it won't be without a hiccup or two. And we're having a hiccup now. That hiccup now, and it'll be intermittent over the next couple of years, is simply these delays in bringing projects online, which in turn and the delay in building out the enrichment cycle and the conversion. Conversion's not as big an issue as enrichment, but it's certainly an issue. And then, of course, the permitting and streamlining the permitting on the plants. So it's all lagging. We're working on all of it at the same time. I mean, not ourselves, but the industry is. And as a result, I think it's just a matter of a delay. But once they get through these hurdles over the next couple of years, these prices now are good for us. I don't see them going significantly lower. As I mentioned, the contracting prices are well above spot. So we just think it's going to be a great business climate to be in. With the delay is on both sides, the consumer and the producer. So it's not going to create a big train wreck. It's just going to stretch out the curve a bit.
Right. Let's maybe also touch on the Russian export ban that's a new thing here. Is that like a sort of a bargaining chip that's soon going to disappear, or how do you view that?
Well, that's been really a topic of great discussion in the U.S. because Trump is viewed as being more moderate towards Russia than the Biden and his administration, and I think public opinion here supports that. There's certainly a weariness of continuing the onslaught over there, in spite of Biden's most recent walking out the door lame duck actions. But people have to realize that while Trump may end up eventually coming to some sort of a easing of tensions with Russia, even if they quote kiss and make up, it's not going to immediately go back to where it was, nor do I think it'll ever go back to where it was. People fail to realize Trump's the biggest protectionist president we've had in 100 years. He's all about U.S. supply, U.S. production, tariffs on everybody. He's all about domestic content and having a strong energy base, and nuclear is a part of that. So, if suddenly the ban were to get reversed, yeah, it would bring some additional material into the market. But at the same time, Russia has no incentive to sell to the West. The economic benefit from their nuclear industry is infinitesimally small compared to their oil and gas. Last I saw, it was under 2%. Their entire nuclear export, be it uranium, be it transportation of Kazakh uranium through their port, be it enrichment, conversion, all less than 2% of their oil and gas revenue. So it's a drop in the bucket. So they are under no economic incentive to sell, and certainly until tensions ease over there, I think you'll see a total ban. And I was saying that 6 months ago, people thought I was nuts. So if you take the emotions out of the Ukrainian situation and you just look at it on cold hard economics, there's not a reason on earth that Russia would want to sell uranium to the West.
Right. Yeah. Well, uranium still being a long-term play here, of course. Very long-term for some. If we want to shorten the time frame a little bit, let's look at it from a trading perspective or something. What are you looking at for people holding these stocks? What are you looking at here for the next 6 months or so? Are we gonna see a catalyst? What are the catalysts gonna be? What are you seeing on the shorter time frame?
Well, I think there's, in connection with the Russian thing and everything else, there's been a disappointment, and I think it's widespread and pervasive, that spot's $80. It's like, my gosh, why isn't it 100? Why isn't it 120? And there's been very little action in the spot market, very low volumes. At some point, that's going to have to change. They predicted that right after WNA in September in London that we'd see a significant increase in spot activity, but we really haven't. And there's some speculation that China's been offloading end of month on spot to keep the price down a bit. Lots of speculation, nothing really solid. Speculation that one of the U.S. producers has been selling some of their uranium inventory in to pay for acquisitions. Here again, speculation. May or may not be true. But the uranium market is so non-transparent that it's very difficult to tell who's doing what and why. So you have to really have faith in the fact that these reactors aren't going to shut down. We're still building more of them. The demand picture will be there. And also have to realize that utilities, even the least conservative or most aggressive ones, still contract a 3-year supply of uranium for their reactors. So what I'm saying is that news that should affect the market or might affect gold, which is a very liquid commodity, doesn't necessarily immediately impact the price of uranium. It can very easily be a 6-month delay in terms of reacting to news, because there's just not an immediate reason someone has to buy or sell uranium on a given day. And so oftentimes you'll see this delay in there. And I think that, if I'm looking at, I hold a number of stocks. I have 2 or 3 that I trade rather aggressively. And then I have some that I just sit on and wait, and I don't touch them. And obviously my enCore position, I couldn't trade it, and I don't want to trade it, but I am active. For instance, this current euphoria in the market now. I mean, I'm a very long-term bull. I feel very, very optimistic that in 3 to 4 months, we'll see higher prices in most of these stocks. At the same time, if we don't see spot come up here shortly with this rally we've had based on Russia, you'll see the stock sell off a bit. So trading opportunity.
Yeah.
And even if spot does go to 90, if the stocks continue to go up for another week or so like they've been going, you'll probably have a trading opportunity. But you know, how far down is it going to go? Do you miss the boat by trading down? You know, lots of, and trading's not for everyone.
Yeah.
So
if you look at the longer term again, I think what investors, not traders, can derive the most comfort out of is certainly, if you look at the structure of the market, there are diminished volumes, yet the long-term price, the reference price, is up like 25% or something this year. So that makes me think, like, what's going to happen when the volumes double or triple?
absolutely.
I mean, that's
and eventually it will happen, because these guys that have 2 and 3 years of supply, they may wait till if they don't like the price. And you got to remember, almost all these fuel buyers have been doing this for decades. There are not a lot of young guys in the fuel buyer market. So their history, almost their entire career, they've been able to just pick the phone up and buy it for whatever price they want. It's been a buyer's market. So it's hard for them to realize that we're in a seller's market now. And so
when does that change? Well, like, do you think there's like a moment, or is it a process?
It's a process. It's a process. And part of the issue is not, it's a very small club, you know, maybe 50 people or 100 people. Very few companies. And here again, I'm speaking in the US, and not a whole lot bigger if you go around the world, but none of them want to be the first one to chase anything. And so what you're seeing is a lot more, and this is something important. Spot prices, all the transactions are presumably reported. When people put out a contract to bid on, an RFP, request for proposal, those usually get reported, but maybe not always. And when the request goes out, everyone knows it goes out. But when they actually sign a deal with someone, that may or may not get reported. And what we're seeing a huge increase in are sole source contracts, where the customer comes to the seller and negotiates a contract, not with a group of people to bid it, but a sole source contract. And those, some get reported, a lot of them don't. And so the market is unfortunately growing less transparent because of these, and the contractual obligations on the producers to not disclose the terms of the contract are pretty extreme.
Yeah. I had a podcast with Rick Rule some weeks ago, and we touched upon uranium, of course. He was saying, like, he doesn't really understand too much why people are not interested as much in uranium stocks here, because the future profitability is actually, I mean, it's pretty much set in stone. They're going to get these contracts that are very lucrative, and they're going to be 10-year long contracts. You can look out in the future of a very long time, and which is pretty much unique, you could argue.
It really is. And by the way, I should have mentioned Rick's name. He's certainly one of the more outstanding names in the business in terms of an investor and a financier, and both personally and corporately. He's had some really good long-term vision, and kind of to echo what you've said. He was hot on the Yukon years before the big Yukon gold rush came in, and not the first one, the second one, the one in recent years. But he told me one day that I congratulated him on being able to see so far into the future. He said, yeah, he appreciated that, but sometimes he sees too far into the future, and it's a painful wait. But he's certainly one of the leaders in the industry without a doubt, and has some great long-term vision. But he's been on uranium several times and got off of it when it wasn't right. You got to remember the last cycle, we weren't seeing increased demand. We just had a supply interruption. So this is a completely different market. But I viewed it as, even before the price started moving, as the most certain supply-demand imbalance, most absolute gonna happen situation with any of the commodities. And now we're seeing that manifested. But the one thing that you don't know is the time delays in it, the uniqueness of the contracting situation, both in terms of no urgency to buy versus having a 5 or 10 year supply, and the delays in permitting. It's a very unique industry, but requires patience, but it also provides enormous returns when you're in the right spot.
Do you think investors it will be smart to be invested throughout the entire decade here, or what
I do. I mean, for those that have the ability to trade, I think the best thing to do is to buy, 70, 80, whatever is for the individual person. I'm not an investment advisor, so, but, I personally am very comfortable, with probably 80%, 90, not counting my enCore position, but my other stocks in the uranium world. I've probably got 70 to 80% of them that I'm just holding, and 20 to 30 that I trade aggressively with. And everyone's going to find their own balance, but I think, putting some away, even in a retirement account or something of that nature, it's going to be there. It's going to make some money. Once you put it in there, you're tempted to sell it as much.
Yeah, the market isn't because a lot of people are looking at like the past cycle, 2004, 2007, boom bust.
Yeah, don't. It's got nothing to do
The
with
70s. I told them the 70s.
Yeah, that's the only one. Actually, pre-3 Mile Island. The 70s, 3 Mile Island came in 79, and that was game over. And what they've got to look at is, I've actually often said that what we're looking at now is go back to 3 Mile Island, forget about the last 44 years. That's where we are now. We're now right before 3 Mile Island. When everyone was planning to build 300 plants in the US and we're going to need uranium, and we had all these companies and all these, that's where we are in the cycle. It's just going to take a while to catch up.
Yeah, I think it might be even more powerful with all the AI and data centers.
It will be. Yeah, it will be. That people don't realize, when they talk about number of reactors, people are thinking one reactor is the same as another reactor in terms of its size, and its size is directly related to its fuel consumption. Yeah. But all those reactors back in 79 were generally 440 kilowatts instead of the ones now that are 1 meg. So the ones now are 2 to 2.5 times bigger than the ones back then. So they're going to consume 2 to 2.5 times as much fuel. Direct relationship.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, often overlooked, I would say. Kind of went through the questions here. Are there any closing thoughts, or what do you think the uranium investor, those that are looking to get maybe into it or interested on the sidelines, what do they need to know, and why should they be interested? Can you summarize it, or is there something?
Yeah, I think what I would do, I mean, we've covered, the thesis on uranium pretty well, but for the investor, I would say, whatever company you get involved with, make sure the people that are running it know something about uranium, something more than how to spell it.
Yeah.
Because there's
a lot of them.
There's 100 and some companies out there, and, over half of them can barely spell uranium. Some of them have a hard time coming up with the symbol.
No,
that's just one letter. So, just be careful. I think the strongest due diligence is the people you're looking at, and, obviously seeing if they have some resources that merit following as well. But you got to have both. You got to have the right people that have some experience in uranium, and people and good projects.
With enCore, before I forget, of course, I have to ask, are you guys satisfied with your current resource base, or is there more M&A in the pipelines? You guys used to do like one M&A transaction every year. Is that going to be the tradition, or is that going to stop?
We're never satisfied. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, of course.
And I've said openly, there's a handful of opportunities in the US because we want to stay US focused. That's where the biggest imbalance is. And it's no secret. I mean, it's a small universe. There are some private assets not everyone knows of, but most of the assets everyone's familiar with. It's all a matter of pricing and all that. Are we interested in everything in the US? No. Are we interested in some things in the US? Certainly. Are we happy with the current pricing? Well, probably not, or we'd be doing something. So,
yeah. Do you think?
But we always watch it every day. We watch it.
Yeah. To close it off, maybe on like 2 years or so ago, people were saying like, oh, the break even for the sector is around $60 or something. If you were to like put a number on it, is it like 80 now, 85, or because some people
ISR and conventional are going to be pretty different, at least in the US. I mean, yeah, so that's probably a little high for ISR and probably a little low for conventional. Maybe $20 or 30 on conventional. And that's just my guess. I'm not an expert on conventional by any means.
It would be not a stretch to say that triple-digit uranium is probably going to be needed for a long time.
I think triple-digit uranium's needed to have a booming sector. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
At $100 a pound, everybody's happy, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I think that should be a great business. Well, that's why I'm still in here.
yeah, but I mean, keep in mind, these contracts, which is where 95 plus 99 maybe% of the uranium's traded, are doing much better than they were when spot was at 110 or whatever last January.
Yeah,
So
these ceilings are quite high on some of these contracts here. Apparently,
well, they are, and I mean, back at that point, we were looking at roughly $60 for a floor when spot was at its high. And now we're looking at floors that are essentially equal to or maybe somewhat higher than spot.
yeah.
So it's changed. The dynamics have changed. It's very unfortunate for the investors that spot uranium is the best indicator that they have, because it's an awful indicator. It's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have a lot to do with the real uranium market, but it's the only thing that's out there because of the confidentiality requirements of the customers. So I think as more and more companies go into production, that will become more and more transparent, not through individual contracts, but through cash flow analysis of their financial statements. You'll be able to see what their realized prices are. You won't know who's buying it necessarily, but you will see that. But until companies are actually in production and then ramped up to a commercial production level, I mean, we're still on a ramp up at enCore. It's going to be very difficult to tell.
Yeah. Of course, the last question, I gotta ask it for the sake of the audience because they like this kind of stuff. You might not like it, but I have to.
That's
By the end
okay.
of
I'm
next
not
year,
answer it.
by the end of next year, where is the spot price? Where is it gonna be? Take a guess.
By the end of 25,
Yeah.
by the end of 25, spot 108.
Fair enough. This should be good.
And really to pick the spot price, there's a very scientific method of doing it. You lay out a tape measure on the wall sideways, you blindfold yourself and you throw a dart.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how you predict the spot price.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we'll see. As long as it goes up, it should be constructive for good companies like the ones you are running. The sector is looking good. Nuclear renaissance is still here, and it's global. It's growing, so it's exciting times, and we're not even in the eye of the storm. We're still at the beginning, you say, and I think you might be on the mark with that remark.
Very good. Well, Bart, thanks for catching up. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. Cheers.
Take care.